Julian woke to a soft hum that seemed to seep into his bones, a rhythm neither entirely mechanical nor organic, vibrating through the floor of the medical station like a lullaby written by engineers with questionable taste in music. The walls glowed faintly, panels of light shifting in colors he couldn't name, soft blues and greens that melted into gentle golds, as if the room itself was slowly deciding how it wanted to greet him that morning. He squinted against the brightness, blinking at unfamiliar shapes hovering in the air. Containers of plants that swayed as though underwater, small devices that rotated in place and occasionally beeped in protest, and a floor that shimmered faintly with embedded circuits, as if the station itself were alive, judging him. He tried to sit up, but his limbs were awkward with the memory of injury, and the bed tilted almost mischievously beneath him, as if it had its own sense of humor. "Well," he muttered, "either this is advanced medical care or a really elaborate prank." His words bounced off the walls, the soft hum swallowing them like an amused audience. That was when he noticed her. She moved with a calm precision that contrasted sharply with his clumsy awakening, floating into the room on legs that seemed longer than necessary, clad in a tunic of iridescent green that reflected the ambient light in subtle, shifting waves. Her ears caught his attention first, long and elegant, trailing past her shoulders like delicate fins that twitched ever so slightly as she approached. He realized quickly that she was studying him, not with cold clinical interest, but with an intensity that made him feel awkward, as if his every movement were being catalogued for posterity. Good morning," he ventured, voice still thick with sleep and confusion. She inclined her head once, barely perceptible, and gestured toward a small console. Julian leaned forward to inspect it, pressing buttons at random, which immediately triggered a faint whir and the gentle appearance of hovering nutrient capsules. One rolled off the edge, spinning lazily through the air. "Whoa, easy there," he said, lunging to catch it and almost knocking over another. She reacted instantly, moving with a grace that made him look like a clumsy child, catching the capsule midair before it hit the floor. Her ears flicked, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. He didn't notice at first, too busy trying not to break everything in sight. "Sorry," he said sheepishly. "I'm, hazardous apparently." She didn't respond, only returned to her position beside the bed, hands folded neatly in front of her, ears still twitching faintly, and eyes wide enough to suggest a careful calculation of whether he was a threat or merely inept. Julian's curiosity, as always, outweighed caution. He attempted humor. "Do these beds have mood settings? Because I'm pretty sure mine thinks I'm a threat. Or maybe it's judging my fashion sense." He glanced down at his hospital gown, which didn't have much of a fashion sense at all. A corner of her lips twitched, almost imperceptibly. That was encouragement enough for Julian to continue, because human pride required recognition, even on an alien station. "So," he said, shifting slightly to avoid rolling off the tilting bed again, "do you do medical stuff for a living? Or are you secretly plotting to turn me into a lab rat for, alien experiments?" She tilted her head, long ears flicking, and Julian couldn't tell whether she found him amusing, alarming, or both. Finally, he decided to break the tension in the only way he knew how. He complimented her, blithely, as if he were noting the weather. "You look perfect in that color," he said, nodding at her tunic like it was the most obvious statement in the world. The effect was instantaneous. Her posture froze, and the faint blush bloomed deeper, her hands clenching so slightly he almost noticed. Julian squinted, suddenly aware that he might have said something more significant than he intended. That sounded okay, right? I mean, complimenting tunics is totally normal, right?" He laughed nervously, which only seemed to make the nurse's discomfort more pronounced. Her ears twitched rapidly, as if signaling an internal debate, and Julian realized, too late, that he might have just committed some kind of social faux pas, though he couldn't for the life of him guess what it was. Trying to recover, he fumbled for something else to talk about, anything to reduce the tension. "Do these, floating thingies always hover like that? Or is it just for dramatic effect?" He pointed at the nutrient capsules, which bobbed serenely in the air like tiny glowing jellyfish. The nurse exhaled a quiet, almost human sigh, which made him grin. "Okay, good, you do have a sense of humor," he said, delighted at the minor victory. "We're off to a solid start." She finally spoke, her voice soft but carrying an unmistakable weight. "It is unusual for your kind to speak such words without intent." Julian blinked, confused. "Intent? I just complimented your tunic." The way she shifted, ever so slightly, ears flicking in a rhythm he couldn't interpret, suggested that his simple remark had triggered a cascade of cultural significance far beyond his comprehension. He laughed, scratching the back of his neck. "Great, I'm already messing up alien etiquette. Should I bow now? Or maybe offer a holographic flower?" She raised an eyebrow, and though it was subtle, Julian felt like he'd scored a small victory. As he settled back against the bed, the hum of the station resumed its soothing rhythm. Julian, injured but undeterred, thought that perhaps the alien nurse's composure was as complex as the station itself, and that navigating both would be an adventure filled with unexpected laughter, confusion, and maybe, if he played it right, friendship. For now, though, he decided it was enough just to survive the first morning without breaking anything irreparably, or causing a diplomatic incident. Julian had spent the morning negotiating with the station's peculiar amenities, which, judging by their responses, seemed to have a sense of humor rivaling his own. A beverage dispenser, activated by what appeared to be emotion-sensing pulses, had first squirted an acidic green liquid at his forehead when it detected what it interpreted as panic, then politely poured a cup of something warm when he laughed at its apparent prank. Meanwhile, the alien nurse hovered nearby, her long ears twitching in rhythm with the machine's minor outbursts, and Julian suspected she was suppressing a laugh, but he couldn't be certain. In her culture, expression was a finely tuned instrument, and he had no manual. "Do these stations always try to kill their patients before breakfast?" he asked, adjusting the sheets around him, though the bed seemed to resist, tilting slightly as if it disagreed. The nurse stepped closer, moving in that fluid, deliberate way that made him feel simultaneously observed and oddly protected. Her ears flicked, a subtle twitch that he was beginning to recognize as her version of blinking. Julian grinned, pointing at them. "Your, antennas? They're adorable, like cat ears for telepathy or something. Do they communicate emotions? Or do they just judge me silently?" She blinked slowly, an almost imperceptible smile tugging at her lips. That small gesture encouraged him. "Good, you judge silently. That's preferable to actual confrontation." He attempted to lift his legs from the bed to stretch, triggering a minor cascade of floating medical devices that swirled around him like confused fireflies. One of them, a small luminescent orb, hovered inches from his face, blinking rapidly. All right, I get it, you're the boss," he said, ducking and waving his hands. The nurse moved to intercept, her long fingers catching the orb in midair before it could collide with his forehead. Her ears twitched once sharply. He assumed in mild exasperation, and she handed it back to its docking station, her eyes glimmering with something he could not name. As the morning progressed, Julian became aware of an odd rhythm in the station, almost as if the entire environment was learning him. Floor panels shifted subtly underfoot, projecting minor holographic guides that indicated where to step, and the overhead lights dimmed or brightened in response to his minor complaints about glare. At one point, he tripped over a floating utility drone, and the nurse caught it with a practiced motion that made him stumble into her personal space. He froze, suddenly aware of the effect of his earlier compliment. "I swear I meant the tunic, not whatever this is," he muttered, raising his hands defensively. Her ears flicked sharply, and she glanced away, pretending to adjust her tunic. But Julian caught the tiniest shiver of reaction. He leaned back, deciding to attempt humor as a way of defusing his ongoing embarrassment. "You know, in my culture, we have this thing called personal space. It's sacred. And yet, somehow, your species appears to treat it like a gentle suggestion." She tilted her head, almost imperceptibly amused. her ears flicking in a way that made him certain she was amused in a serious, alien sort of way. "Right?" he said, patting the bed. "I get it. I'm a hazard. Don't worry. I accept my role as the bumbling human who confuses alien etiquette." Later, a minor crisis broke the rhythm, and it came in the form of a small, luminescent creature that had somehow escaped one of the suspended containers. Julian watched it flit through the air, its glow pulsing like a heartbeat. He lunged, missed, and crashed into a hovering tray, sending capsules spinning in every direction. The nurse acted immediately, scooping him aside with ease while snaring the creature mid-flight, her ears twitching furiously. Julian lay on the floor, laughing and groaning at once. "I swear, I'm not normally this chaotic. I think it's just your station's fault." She straightened, offering him a hand up, and he took it, feeling her fingers curl gently around his in a gesture both firm and cautious. "Perhaps," she said softly, her voice calm but carrying an undertone that made him pause. "Your kind is more entertaining than usual." Julian laughed. "Entertaining, yes. I'll take that as a compliment. Though, again, I should probably compliment your tunic carefully this time, before I accidentally propose interstellar marriage." She tilted her head, a faint chuckle escaping her, ears twitching in a rhythm that seemed almost musical. Julian took note of the tiny details. The way her fingers lingered on the console, how her eyes followed him with curiosity, and how her presence, though alien, was becoming a strangely comforting constant in the chaos. By the afternoon, Julian was learning to anticipate the quirks of the station. The way a console would glow brighter when he joked, or how the bed would tilt slightly to encourage rest after his clumsy maneuvers. The nurse, for her part, adapted subtly, adjusting her movements to keep him safe while giving him enough freedom to feel he had some control. They shared small moments of laughter, like when he attempted to mimic her precise movements and nearly toppled a tray of delicate tools, or when he sarcastically narrated the romantic pursuit of a cleaning drone, which beeped indignantly as it hovered past. As the day drew on, Julian realized something surprising. Despite the strangeness of the station and the weight of cultural misunderstandings, he genuinely enjoyed her presence. The alien nurse, usually so reserved and precise, had moments where her posture softened, ears flicking in subtle amusement, and he found himself eager to see these flashes, however brief. He sensed, too, that she was watching him closely, perhaps puzzling over his human unpredictability, and that small, shared understanding was forming between them, a bridge built on humor, confusion, and the slow unraveling of cultural barriers. By evening, Julian reclined, exhausted but content, a faint smile tugging at his lips. He glanced at her, the nurse quietly organizing the floating capsules with the meticulous care of someone unused to chaos yet growing accustomed to it. "You know," he said, voice softening, "I think we're going to get along just fine. Maybe even survive the rest of this station together." Her ears flicked once, almost imperceptibly, and she nodded, a subtle acknowledgement that spoke volumes. Julian chuckled, letting the strange rhythm of the station carry them forward, a day of shared laughter and small triumphs behind them, and the promise of connection. Awkward, uncertain, but undeniably present. Stretching ahead, Julian awoke to the low hum of the station once more, though it no longer felt alien or threatening. The lights shifted in gentle waves, brushing the room with colors that seemed to echo his mood, or perhaps the mood he wished to cultivate. The alien nurse was already there, standing by the console with quiet precision, her long ears tracing subtle arcs as she adjusted the hovering devices. Julian smiled, realizing he had begun to notice patterns in her movements, rhythms that once would have seemed inscrutable. He reached toward a panel and pressed a button tentatively, half expecting another prank from the station, but this time it responded predictably, offering a tray of morning rations with polite efficiency. The small victory felt like progress. "Good morning," he said, grinning despite the lingering soreness in his limbs. She inclined her head, faintly, and for the first time, Julian thought he saw humor spark in her eyes. Small, careful, but unmistakable. I hope your circuits haven't started plotting my demise overnight, he added lightly, nudging the tray. She raised an eyebrow, and he laughed, realizing that even this simple exchange had become a kind of ritual between them, a bridge across worlds that relied on humor as much as understanding. The morning brought a minor crisis when an experimental healing device, still in calibration, projected a cascade of holographic images across the room. The images flickered, past patience, their silhouettes shifting in iridescent colors, creating the impression of a miniature galaxy dancing before them. Julian froze, startled, and then noticed the nurse stiffen beside him, ears flicking in rapid, sharp movements. "Not to worry," he said, raising his hands. "I'm excellent at improvising under pressure." Mostly. The nurse's lips twitched, the faintest sign of amusement, and she gestured for him to remain still. Together, they guided the holograms back into the device, laughter breaking through as Julian struggled comically with the controls, twisting knobs and pressing panels at odd angles, and she, with her long, elegant fingers, steadied both him and the device. Afterward, Julian leaned back on the bed, exhausted but smiling, and noticed how naturally her presence now filled the room. He spoke softly, "You know, I think I understand a little more about your culture now. And maybe a little about myself too." She tilted her head, ears flicking in a rhythm he had learned to read. Curiosity, approval, and something like warmth. "Your approach is unusual," she said carefully, "but effective." Julian grinned, feeling the weight of their shared experience. He had begun to navigate not just the station, but her world, recognizing that humor, patience, and sincerity were languages she could understand, and he could learn. Lunch arrived, served by the floating capsules, which he now greeted with mock reverence. "Ah, the royal couriers of nutrition," he said, watching the nurse catch one that drifted too close to his head. She exhaled quietly, almost imperceptibly amused. They shared small jokes, subtle and careful, testing boundaries that were once rigid. When he attempted to mimic the precise arc of her movements while catching a capsule, he ended up spinning slightly and colliding with her arm. "Sorry." He laughed. She shook her head, the smallest shake, and Julian noticed how her eyes softened in response, the blush in her cheeks faint but real. By afternoon, Julian felt an unfamiliar confidence. He had learned the quirks of the station, the peculiar humor of its systems, and the silent language of her gestures. He also realized that the compliment he had given on her tunic, once a near-catastrophic cultural misstep, had become a shared reference, a private joke between them. "I promise," he said, looking her in the eyes. "Next time I compliment your tunic, I'll do it with full awareness of the interstellar implications." She inclined her head, a hint of a smile, and flicked her ears once lightly, enough to make Julian's chest tighten pleasantly. Their final task of the day involved calibrating a new device designed to accelerate healing, a machine that seemed to resist logic as much as it responded to intent. Julian, working alongside her, realized he now trusted her instincts implicitly, and she, in turn, allowed him to guide certain actions, even laughing at his overly dramatic gestures. The device finally stabilized, humming in harmony with the station, and Julian leaned back, exhausted but triumphant. He glanced at her, noticing the quiet pride in her posture, ears relaxed in a rare display of ease. As evening fell, the station's lights dimmed, wrapping the room in soft colors that seemed almost intimate. Julian looked at the nurse, realizing how much he had grown. From a bumbling, oblivious patient to someone capable of understanding subtle cultural cues, forming genuine connection across vast differences. She, too, had shifted. Her initial rigidity had softened into a tentative warmth, guided by his humor and sincerity. Julian reached out, lightly touching one of her fingers, and she did not withdraw. Instead, she allowed the contact, a silent acknowledgement that the bond between them was real, fragile but growing, built on laughter, trust, and small shared victories. "Not a bad day," he said quietly, smiling. She tilted her head, ears flicking once, and murmured, No, not bad at all. Julian laughed softly. Then I guess we survive another day together. Huh? She nodded, a subtle motion, and for the first time, Julian felt certain that despite the vast differences between them, species, culture, even worlds, they had discovered something remarkable. A connection that was equal parts humor, understanding, and genuine affection. The station hummed around them, indifferent yet supportive, as if acknowledging that in the quiet chaos of galactic care, a human and an alien had found a way to navigate life together, bridging the distance between stars with laughter, sincerity, and the tiniest, most elegant gestures of the heart.